Namaste, Dr. Richard. Welcome to Bharat News. It's our honor that you are here and sharing your wisdom with us.
The honor is mine, sir. I'm very happy to be here and to speak with your audience.
Thank you so much, sir. So, sir, before we delve into the serious topics of the ethnic cleansing of Hindus and Jews, so let's discuss you first. In the sense, let's tell our audience about your work as a journalist and as a human rights activist in Israel, in Bangladesh, in USA, in India, and globally. Your work with Interfaith Strength Organization, your work with Hindu American Foundation, and with your colleagues and friends such as Ravindra Ghosh and Samir Kalra, and the books you have written. Sir, can you tell us about your work?
Yeah, well, if I were to talk about all my work, it would probably take more time and not interest
Yeah.
your audience. So I do want to focus on my work in South Asia in particular, my work with the Hindu community. I've been fighting the ethnic cleansing of Hindus in Bangladesh for almost 20 years. And I have to tell you, for a lot of that time, I was virtually alone. There was very little recognition among the Hindu community, both in India and in the diaspora, either of this issue or that there should be anything done about it. So that was the first challenge, was how do we get people to change their attitudes about it? And quite frankly, wasn't only fighting that, wasn't only fighting the terrorists and others who were committing these atrocities. I was fighting the apathy of the international community. The media would focus on so many issues they claimed were human rights, but never talked about what was happening to Hindus. When I would go to Washington initially and talk to people about this, they would say, "Oh, Bangladesh is a moderate country. Why? It's an ally. Why should? Why, they're not doing that." Later, it was, "Well, listen, Sheikh Hasina and the Awami League, they're the good party. They're the ones we want to support." So that was the initial attitude I had to fight, and eventually it worked, because eventually you just can't cover up the level of atrocity that's being committed. And in 2010 or 2010, perhaps, a good friend of mine, a former Congressman, Bob Dole, when he was Congressman, he was the first person to give a rather lengthy speech on the floor of the Congress, not about atrocities against minorities, but specifically about what was being done to Hindus in Bangladesh. Over time, finally, as you probably know, it's become quite an issue now, and it is recognized an issue in India. And I remember many years ago meeting with your prime minister. Well, he was then chief minister of Gujarat, and he, by the way, is one of my heroes in the world. But he asked, "What can I do? What can I do about this?" And I said to him, "Well, today I'm addressing you as Mr. Chief Minister. I know one day I will address you as Mr. Prime Minister. And when you are Prime Minister, please don't forget the Hindus of Bangladesh and make that part of your foreign policy." Of course, for Modi ji, things are really complicated geopolitically, and he was developing a relationship with Bangladesh, but he never forgot it. And the NRC CAA, which I thought was very significant, it was the very first time the government of India recognized that Hindus were being persecuted in Bangladesh. That was an extremely important step, because now, as India weighs what to do and how to respond to the atrocities going on today, it has a precedent for saying that Hindus are being persecuted. So yes, I work to get people out of Afghanistan. I am a consistent advocate for what Israel does and for the Israel-India relationship and the U.S.-Israel relationship, the U.S.-India relationship. The thing I wanted to focus on besides that right now is what's happening to people of Bangladesh, because we still have too many people in this world who have influence saying they don't want to do anything about it. And that's our greatest enemy.
Definitely, sir. And sir, as you rightly tell that no media is reporting much on Hindus. Everyone knows about the Nazi Holocaust where 6 million Jews were being killed. But no one knows about the 1971, where 3 million Hindus were killed. No one knew about the 1947, the partition of India and Pakistan, where 6 to 7 million Hindus were killed. And not only killed, you know how they function, they gang rape, they kidnap, they do abduction, and many other things. And sir, as we see to the data in 1947, in Bangladesh, there were 33% of Hindus. In 71, 20%. In 2001, it was less than 10%. And in the 2022 census, it is 8% of Hindus left in Bangladesh now. So, sir, what do you think are the motivating factors of these organizations who are behind the killings of Bangladeshi Hindus? Suppose we talk about the USA. In USA, Hindus and Jews face the same common problem from Council for American Islamic Relations, that's called CAIR, Indian American Muslim Council, Stand with Kashmir, and Friends of Kashmir, such organizations. So, what organizations and what other state-sponsored terrorism has been doing in Bangladesh against the Hindu community, sir?
Um, I didn't get quite all of that. However, I will say, yes, Hindus and Jews are very heavily involved with one another in the United States, and we do a lot of common actions together. I remember several years ago, I'm in Chicago, and several years ago, there was an anti-India resolution brought before the Chicago City Council that passed several other liberal jurisdictions. And a very dear friend of mine, I don't know if you're familiar with him, Dr. Bharat Barai, very dear friend of mine, and a tremendous Hindu activist, and actually an old friend of Modi's as well.
Yes.
Anyway, yes, Dr. Barai called me and said, look, this is what we're facing. It's a terrible resolution. It's anti-India. It's not based on fact. It's based on slanders and lies. Can the Jewish community help us? He also called the head of Stand With Us, a Jewish Israel organization here, and some other people. And
Yes.
we mobilized. We mobilized strong, and we lobbied the council people here in the Chicago area. And in the end, Chicago was the first defeat of that resolution, and it wasn't advanced in any major city after that, because when we stood together, we were a force to be reckoned with, number one. And number two, our fight was based on fact and reality, not on slander and lies, which the anti-India resolution was. So Hindus and Jews work together a great deal. I also can tell you that after October 7th, there are many, many Hindus holding rallies in our area and elsewhere in the country. So there's really a growing alliance among Hindus and Jews, and I expect it to continue to grow. By the way, several years ago, we actually started having joint Diwali Hanukkah celebrations, because both are, for our faiths, they are the festivals of light. And actually, the first one was held at my synagogue. So, yes, I think, however,
Dr. Barai is a good friend of Bharat Media and a mentor as well. Yes, he's a great public leader. Yes, he's a
he really
people's
is.
person.
He's tremendous,
Yeah.
and he's also one of the best oncologists in
Yes,
this country. So
definitely.
he is a tremendous man, and
Yes.
I owe a great deal to him. I will say, however, getting back to your question, what's important, and I think we're going to see some changes once there's a new administration in Washington. I think what's important, however, is we have to take that strength and that recognition that both of our peoples face the same sort of prejudice, the same sort of persecution and atrocities. We have to take that and leverage that. And I actually have several plans. I'm already working with Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, who
Yes.
I know very well, is actually lives very close to me. His office is looking at what we can do as well. And so I think as 2025 starts unfolding with changes in Washington, especially, we're going to see a lot more from the Jewish and Hindu communities. Also, by the way, if I mention next year, look for the new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, to be a real leader on this issue.
Okay, sir. Sir, let's discuss about your book. The first book, which you published in 2012, A Quiet Case of Ethnic Cleansing, The Murder of Bangladeshi Hindus. In this book, you have mentioned about the tactics of the Islamic community over there. The murder, rape, and gang rape, forced conversion, temple attacks, adoption, land encroachments. You also mentioned about the documents that included written orders to Pakistani troops and their allies to kill as many Hindus as possible. You talk on anti-Jewish rise in Russia and anti-Hindu pogrom by Muslims. So can you tell our audience about how these Islamic parties over there work, how their ideology work, and how they particularly target the Hindus and Jews globally?
Okay. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, first of all, I want to be clear. When I talk about this, I am not saying all Muslims. I am not saying that the entire 1/3 of the planet falls in. However, whereas it would be wrong to say that, it would also be wrong to ignore the existence and persistence of radical Islam and the support they have among many in the Muslim community. So I think we need to be clear about that. And if we want to identify any individuals, it has to do with what they do and not with what their religion is. However, let's get back to this. The radical Islamists didn't pull their ideology out of the air. It was there for them to choose. And I think one of the things I talk about in that book, which is, by the way, 12 years old, that book, I've been asked to when I was in India in September, I was asked to write a new one to update it, which I will be doing. But in that book, I spend a certain amount of time talking about Islam's distinction, the entire world, into Dar al-Islam, the house of Islam, and Dar al-Harb, the house of war, and any area that's not ruled by under Sharia by Muslims is the house of war, and it's an obligation for all religious Muslims, again, within that context of radical Islam, to fight to, quote unquote, liberate them from whoever is ruling them now. And that also means that any land that was once under Islam is considered to be always under Islam by these same people. That includes, of course, Israel. It also includes Spain. So I think the Europeans need to wake up about this as well. It includes Spain.
Yes.
It also includes Lebanon, and you saw what happened with Lebanon. The Christian community and even minority Muslims were they were brutalized until their power was really reduced in that state. So I think first it's that basic understanding, and then when you say it's a religious obligation, within that same context, you can say that anything that furthers the work of Allah, anything that's a religious obligation, the methods we use are secondary. Now, of course, that's extremely difficult. Extremely problematic. We saw how people justified the worst atrocities on October 7th against Israel, Hamas against Israel. By the way, I was in India on October 7th,
Yeah.
and I'll never forget how warmly the vast number of people, a population in Bharat, who came up to me and wanted to know if I was okay, wanted to know how I was feeling, wanted to know if we needed help, wanted to know what we would be doing next. The support from the people of India, not just the government. Certainly Modi ji has been one of the great leaders in the world, but also from the people, tremendous support, and will be something I remember for the rest of my days and will appreciate. So I think the other thing we want to talk, besides the fact that there's a rationale right there for saying we can do what we want to advance the takeover, the new caliphate, the takeover of the world. Now, with regard to Hindus and Jews are problematic because, well, anytime they wage war against Israel, we beat the crap out of them, and that's fine with me. But besides that, they're problematic because if you look at the Abrahamic religions, the first one being Judaism, Christianity, Islam, each one after Judaism, not counting Judaism, Christianity and Islam, their theology says that we have come to replace what comes before us.
Yes.
In other words, the Jewish law is based on behaviors in accordance with the law. They said, well, with the coming of Jesus saved everyone who would believe in him. So that changed.
Yes.
Then Islam came along and said, well, not so much. We have the final prophet in Muhammad, and so the idea is this. If Jews, who are supposed to have been, overshadowed by the coming of Christianity and Islam, if Jews are successful, have their own country on Muslim land, no less, according to what they would call it. But I don't call it Muslim land. They would, but for Jews to be doing well is something that they can't abide. It's a fact that's contrary to their theology. It was the same thing, by the way, with Christians. That's Christianity at one point, and which is why there has been anti-Semitism. Now, with regard to Hindus, I want to cite something that another good friend of mine, Subramanian Swamy, talked about. If you look across the Middle East, and even to like Iran and other countries, and the Maghreb in northern Africa, the population after the Islamic conquest, centuries ago, population is 99% Islam.
Yes.
Well, we know that the Mughal Empire tried to do the same thing in India, but that's not the case. So Hinduism, and this is just my belief, and I think it's supported by fact, Hinduism has been the religion most resistant to these attempts. Sure, they've tried to convert my people to Jews, but we're a small people. 1 billion plus Muslims, a 1 billion plus Hindus, their very existence is saying, you see, we're not going to accept this religious imperialism. Secondly, Hindus, of course, are the greatest number among the people, non-Muslim populations in South Asia, not just in India, but of course they used to have greater populations in the other countries as well before they were ethnically cleansed. So I talk about minority oppression in Bangladesh, but I always make sure to note that whereas, yes, these radical Islamists will always oppress minorities, they have a particular animus for Hindus, and Hindus are their greatest challenge. And my goodness, you look at all the other minorities of Bangladesh, none of them are 12 million plus like Hindus.
Yes.
Hindus represent a real threat. By the way, if you recall, and I'm sure you do because it's in the history of your country, when India and Pakistan would go to war, Pakistani propaganda would talk about how, the Hindu, they're vegetarians, they're not strong, and we're going to defeat them. And anytime India defeated them, it was another statement that, no, you can't say that about us. We're going to survive, and we're going to survive maybe even long after you do.
Definitely, sir. I was, sir, in Israel in 2018. I have studied cryptography in detail from the Tel Aviv University. I've been all over Israel, went to Jordan border and everywhere. I have many friends in Israel as well, now also. And I believe that after Hindus, Jews are the most decent, respectable, and nearer to the God community. And we support Jews and we support your cause, sir. So, sir, as you mentioned, sir, about anti-Semitism, you spoke largely on the differentiation also of the South Asian anti-Semitism. Sir, can you tell us in detail about it? What is it?
Yeah, anti-Semitism, it just refers to persecution, discrimination, hostility towards Jews. It's a general concept. There is a group known as the International Holocaust Remembrance Association, and they actually have a working definition of anti-Semitism that many nations and states in my country and other localities have adopted as the definition of anti-Semitism. One of the things, there's a whole lot of things. Jews, like Hindus, we know this. When someone is being anti-Hindu, they can make all the excuses they want. Others can make all the excuses they want. But there's an expression in English: if it walks like a duck and quacks, we know it's a duck.
Yeah.
So it's the same. Just as the anti-Hindu persecution, we know this because we see it, and excuses don't change that. Same thing with anti-Semitism. So we know that part of it. Now, the part that's really become, we recognize that, but the part that's become really prominent in the world today is that associated with hatred of Israel. And many of the people will say, well, no, we're not we don't hate Jews, we just hate Israel. We're not anti-Semites. We just don't like the policies of Israel, and we think they're committing genocide, or one or another lie they're going to say. Anyhow, but the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's working definition talks about that. And it recognized, look, not everyone who opposes Israel is an anti-Semite. We need to recognize that. There's some people that are just acting out of what they believe to be the correct geopolitical strategy, even if I disagree with it vehemently. But what that working definition does, however, it says, okay, we understand that. But now, if you take one set of standards and you apply it to every country of the world except Israel, and then a double standard to Israel, that's anti-Semitic. And that's what we're seeing. Because we know, for instance, I tell people, they think there's an occupation in Israel. No, that's not an occupation. Those were never countries. Those were never recognized, or even by the people that claim it as their land. However, there's a real occupation. Pakistan has been occupying Pashtunistan, Baluchistan, and other places. But have they ever said a word about that? No. Those same people have gone into the streets and praised terror-supporting Palestinians in Gaza, people who participated in the atrocities of October 7th. And these people have gone out in the street and praised them. And never once, because if it happened, I'd know it. Never once have they said anything about the innocent Hindus in Bangladesh, Pakistan, who are being ethnically cleansed. And the people who are doing it have as their goal to make Bangladesh and Pakistan free of all Hindus. And that's ethnic cleansing. That's genocide. They don't know what they're talking about when they praise terror-supporting Palestinians.
Definitely, sir. And sir, their ideology in Bangladesh is that they destroy women so that they do not give birth to a Hindu. The children are being targeted to finish off the generation of Hindus. And so, sir, as you told about the anti-Semitism definition, sir, I think that it is very necessary to include the Islamic terrorism as a definition. In 2016, President Obama then told that I am not speaking the word Islamic terrorism. In fact, I am speaking the terrorism definition as it is. So, sir, I think that now it is time to include the definition of Islamic terrorism in the law, in the dictionary. And I have written the definition of Islamic terrorism also by my own. If we can discuss it now, it's very short.
Okay.
So, sir, Islamic terrorism, also referred to as Islamist terrorism, radical Islamic terrorism, or jihadi terrorism, refers to acts of terrorism as defined under applicable national and international law, perpetrated by individuals or groups who claim to act in the name of Islam. I'm not saying that who are practicing Islam, who claim to act in the name of Islam.
I think that's
motivated by fundamentalist and extremist interpretation of Islamic teachings and driven by political, religious, or ideological objectives. These acts may include, but are not limited to, bombings, armed attacks, kidnappings, assassinations, hostage-taking, rapes and gang rapes, murders, forced conversions, temple attacks, abduction, land encroachment, and the incitement of violation with the intent to create widespread fear, intimidate civilian populations, destabilize societies, and influence political or governmental actions.
No, that's excellent. You seem to have covered things very well. And in fact, I was listening for something, and you put it at the end, which was perfect. Because now I'm talking about prior to Sheikh Hasina's ouster. What we saw for decades in Bangladesh, the government wasn't going out and committing these atrocities against Hindus. But when others did, they would never prosecute them. And they knew that. And so that encouraged them to commit terrorism against Hindus. And in fact, I think you could call it terrorism itself, whereas if there's a terrorist act and we don't prosecute, we don't think it's we don't prosecute it, think it's a bad thing, then we're guilty. of terrorism as well. And I think that's what I would fight against with the government of Bangladesh. And I think your definition covers that very well. I think we're seeing something a little different right now.
So we have Sir President Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, and we salute him. So it's not we are against the Islam, but sir, as you told, that it's
Correct.
high time that we have to change our perspective on that matter and include this official definition, and we have to promote this to serve a larger global peace in the world.
By the way, have you gotten it to your government?
No, sir, not yet. I just returned it today only, before half an hour.
I would love to see the government of India
Yes,
and the government of the United States adopt that, and I think Israel would as well, because we know that, again, come January 21st, we're going to see, an alliance. We know that Modi ji and President Trump work together a lot, recognizing India's role in the world, place in the world, and we also know that Benjamin Netanyahu is also friends with them. I think we're going to see with all three of them as leaders that what you're saying has a chance of actually being done. And I think whether it's President Trump or Secretary of State Rubio, they would like to see that kind of definition. They've never been shy about. They've never been shy about saying radical Islamic terrorism.
So it's a two-page definition, but I've completed in soft. I also mentioned about the hard terrorism, the direct violence, and the soft terrorism, including psychological manipulation, propaganda, and radicalization. So it's a two-page detailed definition, sir. I will send it to you.
And another good friend of mine, a colleague who's been a champion of this issue for decades, Dr. Daniel Pipes, talks about called legal Islamism, whereas they will use legal means to gain influence, particularly, for instance, in college campuses in the United States. And he documents a lot of that, or how many have used this. Well, use this idea that you can't be Islamophobic and have to be people who give training sessions, even in the U.S. military and other places. So I think when you identify legal Islamism, you're onto something very, very important.
Definitely, sir. So, sir, let's now discuss your second book, which you published in 2017. What is Moderate Islam? Where you have given the definition of Bangladesh, who depicts itself as a moderate Islamist country and pleasing the USA and the other regional partners. You have also mentioned about the Act, Vested Property Act of Bangladesh, and compared it with Pakistan's Enemy Property Act of 1965. Sir, can you tell us about this Property Act and how it is affecting the minority communities?
Yeah. First of all, I want to ask a question. Bangladeshis have said that Bangladesh have told me, "Oh, no. Yes, our official religion is Islam, but everyone's free to practice their religion." I ask them when they say this, tell me, how would you react if India declared Hinduism to be its official state religion? Or if the United States declared Christianity to be its official state religion? There'd be protests all over the place. There'd be, this is unfair, this is racist, blah, 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 whatever slanders they want to throw out there. However, not a problem for many, many countries, including Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, countries surrounding India. They have Islam as their official religion, or like Pakistan and Afghanistan, are official theocratic states. So I think that's something that's extremely important. Now, you were asking about my second book, right? I'm sorry, I kind of lost track.
No, it's absolutely fine. We are coming to that also. The Awami League Party has just created that Muslim is the official religion of Bangladesh. So that's a loophole. Yeah, sir.
Yes, it is, and the fact is that the radicals, and not just the radicals, so people who are willing to go along with them, they want all Hindus out of Bangladesh, period. And again, the fact that people are not out in the streets protesting that, I mean, it's beyond belief to me. It's beyond, and the fact I'm hoping that again, come 2025, we're going to see some action by my country, because Bangladesh is hidden behind a few things. One, it's saying, no, we're not carrying these out. These are just some bad guys. Secondly, they are counting on Western world in particular to be so committed to Bangladesh being a moderate country and something that would never do bad, that they can't acknowledge it. And that's why we haven't seen nations acknowledge it. Now we've started to see a little bit. I mentioned some people in the U.S. Congress. It was brought up on the floor of the British Parliament since the atrocities after the coup. So I think Bangladesh has hidden behind that, and the fact is that Bangladesh is an extremely vulnerable position, which I'll get to later when we talk, if you want to talk about that. But the fact is they've hidden behind that, and the Western world has cooperated. And what that has meant, as you so accurately pointed out at the beginning of this discussion, is the Hindu population of Bangladesh has gone from almost a third to maybe a 15th. And we know we have documentation of ongoing, unrelenting atrocities against Hindus during that time. You mentioned many of them. And I also, in my book, pointed out something else, because it's very similar to what radical Islamists did in Israel during the time. During the time of the Intifada and the suicide bombings in Israel, which have gone down. They would target places where younger people of childbearing age congregated, nightclubs, malls, things like that. And what you do there, you reduce the gene pool of potential Jewish births. Similarly, if you look at where they are in Bangladesh, you know how many I've documented so many young women, Hindu women, being abducted, gang raped, forced to convert, put in a harem, so that if they were going to have 3-5 Hindu children, now those 3 to 5 children are Muslim. It's probably more than 3 to 5. It's a way of reducing the gene pool of possible new births of Bangladeshi Hindus. So it's not just the people that are being targeted. It's in fact the future that's being taken away from Hindus in Bangladesh by these people.
And sir, funnily, more than our enemy, they are their own enemy. So sir, yesterday I was doing some research and I look at the start date of the Department of State. So according to the report from 2011 to 2016, there have been 70,767 terrorist incidents, out of which 85% of the total, that's 60,320, occurred in Islamic State in the Middle East and North Africa. So more than us, they are their own enemies, sir.
Absolutely, they surely are. I think we need to be even more detailed, because if you know, I know I covered several mosque bombings in Pakistan, and they would say, "Oh, look, they're killing Muslims." You know those mosques? Those were all Baluch or Pashtun. So it was part of their ethnic cleansing of those peoples. Now, did you want to go on with any more? Because I have something I've been wanting to say.
No, sir, definitely. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay. Today, Hindus in Bangladesh, and quite frankly, the entire world, faces a new threat. And with regard to Bangladesh, let me tell you, I'll give you a little example of something that happened to me, and then I'll go further. I was in West Bengal in September. But before I left, I got an email from an organization. I won't mention the name of the organization because some of your viewers might recognize it. And the email said, well, because of all the anti-Hindu violence in Bangladesh, we're planning to have a seminar about it, and we'd like you to be our keynote speaker. Of course, I agreed. I said, well, you know, when you plan to have it, I might be in India. They said, that's right, we'll hook it up so you can speak virtually. That's fine. So I agreed. But then after I was in India for about a couple weeks, maybe, I got another email from that same group, and now you'll know why I didn't mention the name of the group. The email said, well, things are calming down now in Bangladesh, and so we're not going to have any seminar about it, but thank you for agreeing to participate. And that's what we're facing. More than anything, it's the apathy of people who believe, okay, Bangladesh will take care of itself. Now, let's be clear. Bangladesh is not to a lot of people, they don't see it as an important country.
Yeah.
It's extremely important. Number one, geopolitically, it's critical in the whole battle between Chinese expansion. The Chinese have made a lot of inroads into Bangladesh, particularly under Sheikh Hasina, versus the democracies of the world, like the United States and India and Israel. And China has long coveted the Chittagong port on the Bay of Bengal that Bangladesh has. It would help them complete their string of pearls against India. And so it's important geopolitically. And I got to tell you, I've taken pictures, I've gotten evidence that I've sent to U.S. Congress about Chinese activity in that port already. So it's important like that. Also, it's the only country that's among the 10 most populous and the 10 most densely populated. So something's got to give there. Third, it's being the landmass is being reduced by the encroachment of the Bay of Bengal. And then fourth, it's a major trading partner for India. It sends a massive amount of textiles and ready-made garments to the West, and the United States is their biggest customer. So it is an important country, but people are ignoring it. People are saying, well, Muhammad Yunus, yes, he's a Nobel laureate, so they'll be all right with him. Nonsense. We're seeing the atrocities continue. Not only that, what we're seeing in Bangladesh, it's different from before the coup, is now we're seeing the government of Bangladesh take action. They've been arresting Hindu monks, and I have a list of 10 mandirs that were attacked, and there were some government people involved in some of them. So we're seeing something of a change. We know Hindus have been murdered. Hindu community leaders especially have been murdered. So the fact is, if we say, okay, let them take care of it, they're not taking care of it. It's our job to step in, and we're fighting apathy. Whether it's, and quite frankly, I'm looking at your country, I'm looking at my country, because India and the United States are two countries that whoever emerges from the chaos in Bangladesh right now, whichever party emerges, is going to have to rebuild their economy. That was the reason for the coup, the failing economy. Pardon me, not the reservations. If whoever emerges to lead Bangladesh does not fix the economy, they will find themselves thrown out like Sheikh Hasina. Because the people there, they want jobs, they want food, they want a future for their children.
Definitely.
And they cannot rebuild their economy without India, their biggest trading partner, or the United States, their biggest customer. And between India and the United States, we should let them know that we have some conditions for that cooperation, and specifically the conditions being that they will prevent the ethnic cleansing of Hindus, that they will send out their military and their police against those. And by the way, in 2022 and 2023, myself in particular, we forced them to put those people out there during Durga Puja, and they stopped those pogroms those 2 years. So they can do it. Secondly, any member of the police or the government who covers them up, refuses to prosecute the miscreants, sack them immediately. Throw them out. No pension, no nothing. Because they are complicit in ethnic cleansing. Thirdly, you mentioned Vested Property Act. You thought maybe I forgot about it, but I didn't. Okay. They need to, number one, repeal it, and number two, they need to have a real process to return the looted properties to Hindus. By the way, I will add, the Christian minority and the Chittagong Hill people, the Chakmas, are also being under a great deal of pressure. Obviously, I'm just one guy, so I'm focused on the Hindus, but it could be for others as well. So with regard to the Vested Property Act, they need to repeal it, have a process, internationally monitored, by the way, because we can't trust the corrupt people in Bangladesh. international to return looted properties to Hindus. Uh, Professor Abu Barkat of Dhaka University many years ago said that already 70% of Hindu land was stolen. And more recently, he said if something's not done, Hindus will be extinct in Bangladesh. And he's a very renowned professor at Dhaka University. So with regard to the Vested Property Act, I mentioned in my book for two reasons. And the first reason is this. Many of the people here in the West who want to excuse Bangladesh will talk about, well, the revolution, the War of Independence, it was democratic, and Sheikh Mujib Rahman, he was for a democratic institution. Well, that's wrong. He presided over that initial parliament, and one of the first things the Bangladeshi parliament did was it reviewed the laws of Pakistan because it was governed under those laws. And it said, okay, let's go through this. Any laws that are contrary to who we are, we'll have to take out. They did not take out the Vested Property Act. All they did, they took the same law, Enemy Property Act, and they just renamed it Vested Property Act. And so Bangladesh, since its very beginning, under Sheikh Mujib, under Awami League, under all the so-called liberals, they maintained a law that gave the government the right to seize land from minorities, and particularly Hindus, especially their families were forced to go to India. And they said that's what a lot of radicals do. They force them out, they force them to flee, and then they say, oh, this land it should be ours under vested property. And the Awami League took that property to reward their own cadres, and that was a form of patronage as well. So it was for those two reasons. One, to show that the beginnings of Bangladesh were not liberal. And two, was to show that these atrocities are still going on. And they claim to have put in a Vested Property Return Act. Nonsense. It's returned nothing. It must be monitored internationally. And all this goes back to that first point that we talked about. And that is, if we allow the worst among us, the radical Islamists among us, to define what's legitimately Islamic land and what's not, and what legitimately should be a religious obligation of Muslims, if we allow them to define it, then these things will happen. And we're seeing it happening in Bangladesh. But our greatest enemy is apathy. If the world doesn't wake up, if we don't get our countries to take action, and as I said, I know things are very complicated geopolitically for Modi ji, but I also know the man he is, and this is in his mind. I don't know what he'll do with it. But if the world doesn't act, and for instance, another thing my country can do, Bangladesh is the #1 country in the world in the receipt of millions of dollars a month for UN peacekeeping. Now, who funds UN peacekeeping? People like me, American taxpayers. And that's another thing we can. I think our country can say to the UN, listen, you're sending people to keep peace abroad when they can't keep peace at home. You send them back home. Let them keep the peace there, and then we'll talk about getting the. The fact is, either of those things will get the Bangladeshis to take action to prevent these atrocities against Hindus. Now, what happens in the long term, that's certainly more complicated and probably for another interview.
Definitely, sir. And sir, media plays a very important role in this type of conflict, sir. Sir, let's talk about left-wing media. There's an article from BBC. The title is Far Right Spreads False Claims About Muslim Attacks in Bangladesh. So in this article, their agenda is to downplay the attacks on Hindus in Bangladesh and consider it as a political violence. Another, sir, social media and another media company from India. Its name is Scroll. Their article title is How Safe Were Hindus Under Awami League? And in that, there are mentioned that there are no instances of revolutions without spillovers. Second, Hindus support Awami League and thereby this incident happened. Third, Hindus as a group in Bangladesh are vulnerable in the same way as many other groups are vulnerable.
Yes, that is correct.
So, sir, in
I'm
this
sorry, I
they are not.
interrupted you.
No. So, sir, in this they are not specifically pointing on the agenda the ethnic cleansing of Hindu. There are many other factors who work along with, definitely. But the main topic, the ethnic cleansing of Hindus, they are not accepting it, and they are putting pressures on the other factors and highlighting the other factors more, sir. The left media.
That's correct. But yet, those same people, because the BBC is part of this axis of ignorance, they will say the genocide is going on in Gaza when the population is actually increasing. Yes. They will say that, so I actually, quite frankly, on the issue of ethnic cleansing of Bangladeshi Hindus, I give the BBC zero credence. They have no credibility. They don't know, and excuse me for saying, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And it's very interesting that they don't, because they have all these resources where they can get the information if they want it, but yet they don't. Now, what does that tell us? One of two things. Either they dislike Hindus, and I'm willing to say, okay, whatever distaste individuals might have, that's not the major reason. But it fits with their left-wing ideology to say that, no, the bad person in the region is India. The bad person in the region is Modi ji. Oh, they're Hindu Twa. That's a terrible thing. That's what they're saying. And they have no credence. They never knew what they were talking about, by the way. You pointed out that since 47, and even before then, Hindus have been massacred there. Has the BBC ever once said anything? No, they have not. The BBC and the former Bangladeshi government also were part of the lie to say the world must commemorate the Bangladeshi genocide of 1971. Whereas my friends and I, we've been lobbying here in the United States, it should be commemorate the genocide of Bangladeshi Hindus. Because yes, other people were killed. It was during a war, but the target was Hindus. And so the BBC and their left-wing allies just buy into that. Not only that, they've already apparently made a decision that they're going to support Muhammad Yunus as if he's the second coming of Jesus, something like that. That this guy is a savior. Well, he's not. And anyone who's familiar with Bangladesh knows he has a very, very checkered past at best.
And sir, as you rightly said, that
my response to the BBC is they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And the fact that me, one guy, one man, can find these things, and the BBC, with all their resources, can't, that tells me there's something more than ignorance involved.
Salute to you, sir, for your work, sir. And sir, as you rightly tell, that India and US should work hand in hand in this particular Bangladesh conflict.
Yes.
I have been in touch with many lieutenant generals, major generals of India. They are on our board members of Bharat News also, and I have been discussing with them. According to them, the three main factors which affect the ongoing crisis in Bangladesh right now, the main factor is of the US. The US has more interest in Bangladesh, and that's why they have created these problems. Example, the same Martin Islands and other stuff. Another thing is that second factor is Pakistan, ISI backed this attack. And the third thing is that many students from Bangladesh are being going to China. They are being taught there, they are being brainwashed there, and they are being sent back to Bangladesh into the government institutions on a major role. And China is doing these things. But including all these things, the US plays a major role in this, in the destabilization of Bangladesh.
Let me mention something. I heard the conspiracy theories that the US was somehow involved in the coup. You know what? I need to be very clear about that. That's about the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. And I can tell you why it's the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. Well, there are a lot of, let me start with this. Foreign policy professionals look at the world and see spheres of influence dominated by different countries. Bangladesh is part of India's sphere of influence. Look at where the United States is, all, thousand miles away. I can tell you, I take that plane trip a lot. It's a long ways, but it's right there. It's part of India's sphere of influence. India has developed a relationship with Bangladesh, particularly over the last 10 years. And so the United States has no desire to get in the middle of India's sphere of influence. India is our great ally. Why would we want to stick our nose in there. Not only that, think about this. Why would we, the United States, want to cause chaos on India's eastern flank? Makes no sense at all. And we know that the government of India had been building a relationship with the government of Bangladesh as it was. Now, for the United States to be involved in throwing out that government and causing chaos on India's east, that'd be horrible. And so the fact that India is not, as the Indian government has not taken any action, shows you that they know that's nonsense as well. So there's absolutely zero reason. Well, and the other thing is, I heard people say, "Oh, well, they wouldn't give the Sheikh Hasina wouldn't give the U.S. a naval base." Again, stupid. We don't want a naval base there. We don't. We're trying to reduce our footprint. And when we have a great ally like India, a strong ally right there, and India is the great bulwark. If China cannot expand to the west because of India, why the heck do we want to send American troops and assets to that part of the world when it's managed by a great friend and ally? So none of that makes any sense. What the United States can do, and I mentioned this, same thing India can do. Unless you stop this, we're going to take these actions against you. And whereas it's we're talking about the government that emerges, and so the military said that maybe 20 some months from the coup they would have whatever it is. We don't have to wait that long. At the very least, the United States can go to the United Nations, and I'm going to argue in Washington for this too next year. After January, if the United States can go to the United Nations and say, we will not support peacekeeping missions when you put in a country that engages in ethnic cleansing, period. If they can't keep peace at home, we're not going to support them sending people to keep peace abroad. We can do that right away.
Definitely.
So that's where the United States comes in. And I think equally important, if not more so, is what India does.
Definitely.
Again, I don't want to presume what's in Modi ji's mind or the mind of the government of India, but I would be very surprised if they are completely passive in this whole thing. And I would be completely surprised if they don't offer safe haven for persecuted Hindus.
Definitely. So, sir, Supreme Court Judge of India, Justice Surya Kant, said on Sunday, not just military, a civilian army of experts is needed to protect nation's interests from within and outside. So, sir, now, as we have many experts of Jews and Hindus, we are also here promoting our cause and addressing it to various individuals around the globe. Sir, what do you think? Apart from the experts, the intellectual experts, how does a civilian and the community people help during this crisis, or the NGOs say?
Well, I think civilians, what they can do is to be loud and to be present in public. I understand that the Hindu community does not have a history of activism, and Hindu elites often, not always, often are more passive. Well, the people themselves have to take this into their own hands. I'm sure I know many Hindus in India, and I'm sure you do. You know even more who are outraged at what's happening to Hindus in Bangladesh and want to do something about it. Well, here are a few things they can do. We know there's a Bangladeshi embassy in New Delhi, and yes, the police will give you a hard time, but will they give 100 people a hard time if there was a demonstration? And by the way, demonstrations. First of all, I only suggest people do things within the law if they can, and let's say you want to do something, specifically get arrested, but only within the law. But the thing is with demonstrations, if let's say, okay, we'll have a demonstration at Bangladesh embassy. We have it, and then we go home. If we don't come back, it was worthless. So I think one thing, you keep sending people out there. Why are you allowing my people to be murdered? Why are you allowing my people to be committed, to have genocide committed against them, et cetera, et cetera? There's that. Bangladeshi business people come to India all the time to promote their country's products. You get that schedule. And anytime one of them comes there, there's a contingent of people with signs, stop killing Hindus, or whatever you want to say. You don't let them talk. Don't let them breathe. You just keep pounding what's happening, because every day that we don't do something, someone else is killed. Someone else is raped. Another child abducted. So don't let them breathe. And then thirdly, and now this could be for India, it could be here too. I don't like to use the word boycott. It's kind of a nasty word. But I can tell you, I don't buy goods from Bangladesh. And I think civilians, as you say, the entire Hindu and Jewish community, for what that's worth, but the entire Hindu community in India and the United States should say, we will not buy anything made in Bangladesh. And here's something else I do. So the biggest, Bangladesh's biggest customer is Walmart. Hold on.
Yes.
Hold on, I lost you. Here we go. All right, sorry. Bangladesh's biggest customer in the United States is Walmart. Yeah. And they depend on a lot of purchases by the Hindu community. I can tell you that here.
Yes.
But to go and say, we're not buying it here, or you have people handing out leaflets in front of the store, but you make sure you tell them why. We're not buying it because we don't like Walmart. We're not buying it because we think your electronics are not good. But I got something else about that too. But we're not buying it because you provide the economic engine that supports ethnic cleansing of our people. We're not going to be part of that. And you let them know. And you let them know every time. And even if it's only an assistant manager, you keep letting them know. It'll get up to the people who make buying decisions. We know, by the way, that just before the coup in Bangladesh was unable to fulfill a certain number of orders for garments in the United States. Well, guess what they did? They went somewhere else to get them. And that's exactly what they can do if Bangladesh continues to support the genocide, the ethnic cleansing of Hindus in their country. So those are things that can be done. I think similarly, my country, we can put tariffs on their goods. We know we have a president coming in who's not afraid to put tariffs on goods. I think the other thing, by the way, I mentioned, listen, why doesn't India get more aggressive in selling their goods and their garments in the United States? We know, for instance, that India has already ramped up their production of inexpensive electronics and are supplanting China in many stores here. That kind of thing to supplant Bangladesh. And again, if Bangladesh is not taking action, not promising action, not words, not talking about their constitution, but actually taking action that saves lives, such as happened Durga Puja 2022 and 2023, where we saved lives. Unless they do that, we're not going to buy any of their products.
Yes.
Period. I don't know anyone who's going to be hurting if they don't if they have to buy a shirt from Guatemala instead of Bangladesh, or India instead of Bangladesh. And I'm going to mention one other thing. This is not part of the question, but I think it's something important to say when you talk about civilians. So, but I think this is an important historical reference. In the 1970s and the 1980s, you could not drive by a synagogue here in the United States that didn't have a big banner across it that said, "Save Soviet Jews." Our people were being persecuted, facing the same sort of ethnic cleansing in the Soviet Union. And ultimately, the American Jewish community realized that if we didn't do something about it, no one would. And so we did. We lobbied Congress. And in fact, part of the boycott of the Soviet Union's Olympics in 1980 was due to that. Ronald Reagan would always ask about it at his meetings with the Soviets. That was his first question about what's happening with that. People he would, common people who you would see maybe at the water cooler at work, or at the supermarket.
Yes.
Housewives and people with jobs, Jewish people would go to the Soviet Union and smuggle in religious books and things like that, as would lobby Congress. And in the end, We got 1.1 million Jews out of that communist hellhole to freedom. Now, that was in the 1970s and 80s, and we got all that done against who? The mighty Soviet Union. The Soviet Union. This is Bangladesh. Compared to the Soviet Union, a piece of nothing compared to the Soviet Union. If we can't get Bangladesh to do what we got the Soviet Union to do, then we got other problems. Definitely. So again, I think we need to get all the people involved to do those things. Definitely. What would the center do if they continually had members of the Lok Sabha had people coming to them saying, we're not going to vote for you unless you do something about this?
Definitely. So Hindus have to learn more from the Jewish community in this case.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what we do a lot. That's what we do here. I mean, I talk to people in Congress a lot or in the Senate, and the word either spoken or sometimes it doesn't have to be spoken is, if you don't support the issues that are important to me, then I'm going to vote for someone else.
Definitely.
And votes and money are really absolutely critical for all elected officials. And I would assume it's something similar in India as well. I know in India, there's a tendency often to say, well, he's a member of Lok Sabha, we got to have respect. But okay, but that member of the Lok Sabha works for you, works for the people who voted for him or her. And they can always vote for someone else if the person does not do something about this.
So speaking about myself, not from just the media capacity, but whichever way I can help, whether on the ground zero, going to Israel for Jews or going to Bangladesh for Hindus, I am always ready. And we support you, sir. We support your cause. Thank you for your time. And we learned a lot from you and hope peace prevails in the world again, sir. Not only in the Middle East, in South Asia and elsewhere also.
Thank you. Well, I'm very honored. I'm very glad for this discussion. But I also want you to know I'm available anytime. And I'm certainly ready to talk to people about who want to do something about this as well. I'm always there. The Hindu community is in my heart.
Same here, sir.
Yeah. So, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live, and Jai Shri Hind.
Jai Shri Ram, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.